All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to CoCreation Station, the podcast where we talk about the law of attraction, spiritual magic, the journey of life, all that good stuff, how to bring more of what you want into your life. My name is Collin. I am a life coach, tarot, oracle card reader, and medium.
My name is Stephanie, and I help people shift away from negative thinking, and life gets really freaking good.
And we talk about a different topic every week. And this week, we're going to talk about, I think a big part of it is, I'm not sure this is the topic, but gratitude and appreciation is a big part of what we're about to talk about. It's a place where this is one of the times where we didn't turn on the podcast recording soon enough.
So just so you know, I don't know if we ever explained. So when COVID hit and Collin reached out to me, I think it was in October, maybe September, October.
Yeah, I don't remember.
So like, hey man, do you want to like have some friend time on Zoom? Like, what's your schedule look like? And I'm like, yeah, that's great. And so I think we allotted for like an hour, right? And and we picked Sunday mornings at 10:15. Worked for both of us. And we'd just like hang out and like catch up and da da da. And then
on Zoom.
Yeah, on Zoom, exactly. And then, we were doing this for a few weeks, and then we were talking like about a lot of the stuff that we talk about here with y'all. And he's like, dude, this is a podcast. And I'm like, okay. We've even talked about how this is like the second time in our friendship where he's done that. Like he asked me one time, that was how our friendship began, really, was like, do you want to do music? You want to play drums or get together and play music? And I'm like, because Collin's a musician. He's been in a band. He's, and written songs, da da da. And I'm like, I have a bunch of drums. I have a keyboard. I have guitars, but it's really for my little girl to play, and I just bang and let her do her thing. And here he's a musician asking me if I want to play music. I'm like, he's like, what's that look? And I'm like, I'm scared. I'm not. He's like, wasn't that like a good thing? And I'm like, okay. And really, that was the beginning of our friendship. You were in San Diego. How many? I felt like it was a couple of years. And like 9 months. I'm like, what?
My time in San Diego, actually, which was all in the year 20. Well, I got to San Diego on December 2nd, 2012. And I left on October 25th, 2013. So it was 11 months, I guess, total.
And tell me the month again when you left.
October 25th, 2013.
Wow. Okay. So yeah.
It was most of 2013, but it seems like a time warp because so much happened for me in that, whatever it is, 11 months. Yeah. And I met so many of like, now who are my closest inner circle of friends that I'm still friends with. But your friendship, your and my friendship is the biggest time warp of that, because it seems like we were friends for like 3 years or something.
Yeah.
I had met you, like I knew of your existence because of mutual friends, like, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months in. I don't remember exactly when, but we didn't become friends until like my last 3 months or something. It was when we figured it out at one point. It was like a ridiculously short period of time, and it seems like it was years.
Maybe 6 months. Maybe 6 months. Yeah, maybe 6 months. Maybe.
Yeah, I can go back and look at my calendar from the time. I mean, it just wasn't.
But it always blows my mind when you say the time frame, because I'm like, no, dude, we were really hung out for a couple of years before, and you're like, no. And just with the time frame that you said that you're in San Diego, there's no freaking way.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to, like, you even said to me one time, I walked into a room and you're like, you saw me and you're like, oh, we're going to totally be friends. Yeah. And you weren't even on my radar at that point, and it wasn't until probably
that's what later. I do, Stephanie. I come in under the radar.
And then, and even there was a point where we were, because we had mutual friends, and you'd be talking, and I was so envious of what was going on in your life, and I'm like, oh,
really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I thought I shared that with you once, and I'm just like, and then that day that because I wanted some of what you had, and I felt like I was anywhere near that. And then when you came up to me that day, and I had been talking about doing music with my nephew, and he was teaching me how to play the keyboard, guitar. And then you came up to me afterwards, and I was like, wow. And we were just like, clicked, played music. Yeah. Anyways, so
And we started a band.
we did. I thought about that. Like you
It
guys
was short
played.
lived, but
Yeah, you, John, I always forget her, Zoe,
yep.
and here I am. And that's where I had true respect for, more so, of being able to play an instrument and sing. Because here I'm playing the drums and I start singing. I'm like, oh, I can't do both at the same time.
There's one of the we've gone down a total side road here,
I
but
know.
great.
And that's
Because
okay.
we recorded. We recorded, so the first day of the band was really the only day. There were a few other days beyond it that didn't work out. But the one day where all four of us, I think, got together and played music at your house.
I think that was the first day.
Somehow I had the mental wherewithal to just to do what we should do in our friend time, which is why we started talking about this. Which is I just hit record. Like as soon as anybody started playing anything, I just hit record on my iPhone. And so I actually recorded every song we came up with, every song we attempted. And that left me with something like, I don't even know, like 8 songs that are pretty much like, obviously you can kind of.
that many?
There was, I mean, it's again, and maybe it's not 8, maybe it's 6, but it was like,
Interesting.
And it's so funny because it's literally it's just an open air recording of an iPhone. It's not, I didn't set up any special mics or sound equipment or whatever. And your drumming is one of my favorite things.
Oh God.
Because
why?
It's funny because my impression of it is that, and I don't know, this probably isn't at all what was going through your mind, but when I listened to that, now I'm going to have to put some of the crap online now. John's going to freak out at me. Like what I hear is like I'm probably projecting some of the stuff I know was going through. I feel like I know was going through your head at the time. It's like, you're terrified that you're playing drums for the first time with this band. Like that's not like, you wanted to have at least,
not band, but musicians. Like Zoe's a singer. She,
we got to have a whole other episode about the labels thing. But anyway.
Okay.
But like, so what I hear is terror, like you're terrified. But somehow, and this is one of the things I love about art and creativity is like, because you're terrified, you keep it really simple. It almost feels like to me, and I don't know if this is what was going on for you, but like, you're aware that you could do something kind of really that would possibly mess up the vibe if you tried too hard. So you just paid very close attention to what was going on, and you kept what you were doing very simple for yourself as a way of being a part of this, sound mix that was just spontaneously happening. And it's just like, there are some times where it's like, John, I'm playing keyboard and John's playing guitar, and I just hear that, you're like thump, 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 and it like makes the song for me. I don't know what it is. It's like partly it's because you don't usually hear percussion that simplified, like that simple, and B that loud, because somehow it's really loud. But like, I don't know. There's times in those songs where your drumming is like my favorite thing in the world. Honestly,
you're super sweet. I was terrified because,
so I was right about that.
You're here. I'm jamming. With 3 artists, 3 musicians, vocalists, and I'm like, what am I? I'm like so out of my league. You're like, okay, we're in my home.
Do you know I was recording? Do you remember?
Of course.
Oh, you did? Okay.
We weren't recording at first, and then we did, and so and I was so like a duck out of water, like, and then I'm like, what am I supposed to do, you guys? Like, this is not my thing. You guys have recorded probably before and played on stage, and this is all new to me. And I'm like, and John's like, we'll do this. I'm like, okay. And, and so I was just like this.
Take the stick and hit the drum with the stick.
I'm an infant in playing in college, basically. And so, and the only reason I was there was because you guys were meeting at my house. I had some of the instruments, and basically because I know you all, and so I was like, oh, we can meet at my house and da da da.
Mhm.
But yeah.
You know what makes we gotta go back to like the whole thing that we started
No,
with.
I think
Like,
this is it. Like,
oh,
yeah,
okay,
we're just rolling with
all right.
it.
But that makes me think of Meg White, the drummer for the White Stripes, because and you may have no familiarity with this whole controversy, but Meg White, as soon as the White Stripes became big, and like, whenever that was, '04 somewhere, '05, '06, there started to be a big controversy in the sort of national rock music community that I was quasi a part of at the time. That she wasn't, there was two sides. There was this debate. And essentially it was that she had never, she was not someone who like played drums her whole life. She hadn't started when she was 4 years old. She couldn't like, do a Neil Peart from Rush, 15 drum solo for 20 minutes during the shows. I mean, she kept what she did very simple. And she, sort of, she never tried to be anything that she wasn't, she wasn't like the most amazingly technically skilled drummer on earth, and she never tried to be that. And there's a whole part of like people who follow music and musicians themselves, and to me they overvalue skill and technique. And it's like, if they don't feel like the musician has enough skill and technique, like they're not interested, and they devalue the music that results because like, well, that person just isn't very good. And I mean, I find that whole debate hilarious, because one of the most, I mean, there are two songs that they have, and I'm going to blank on the names of them, but one of them became, Seven Nation Army, I think is one. That is now the song that every high school and college marching band in the United States has to learn on day one, because it gets played in we're in COVID now, but I mean, it gets played in every live sporting event, football, like, basketball, whatever. And, taking nothing away from Jack White, who's an amazingly highly skilled guitarist, and he has been playing since he was a little kid. But I mean, what comes out of Seven Nation Army for me, and the other song, which I'm blanking on the title, but it's that one where he goes, how dare you anyway, and you just hear that bass drum where she's just like doom 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 doom, and I'm just like, those are two of like the most recognizable, iconic like rock songs of the last 20 years or so. And they're because, for me, that she just had the wherewithal to like be who she was, be the musician who she was, and serve the song. And I feel like that as a musician myself, I've played with like amazingly skilled people, like way beyond my level of technique and skill, who have really mastered that mindset, that like, and they can, I mean, I've played with drummers who could probably couldn't beat Neil Peart in a competition, but could give him a run for his money, or approaching that. But they will listen very carefully to whoever they're playing with, and they will do just a kick drum and something on the hi-hat if that's what's called for,
Yeah.
But there are also people highly skilled, and some not so highly skilled, that don't have that mindset, and they just sort of, probably unintentionally, you can, as a musician, especially in the band, you can feel them try to take over the song, and it goes off the rails because one part of the team is making it all about them. Again, usually not with any intent. Like, they're not egomaniacs to like dig me, but they're coming at it from like almost like an insecurity of like, well, I better make sure I'm doing enough, so I'm going to hit all the drums and, whatever. Even if this song doesn't call for it, I'm just going to do everything I can do because that's what I'm going to do. And so, it strikes me as you talk about that moment that it's a very similar situation to me, to the Meg White situation, is that I just don't think it's a debate. It's like, those songs are freaking incredible. She played drums on them. End of story.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and as you're talking about sharing all of that, I was thinking like my vibration was such that I attracted you guys. I attracted
Yeah.
artists, and so therefore I
Yeah.
was an equal vibrationally. And
Yeah.
yeah, and it just that thought just went out my head. I was going to say to that. So, yeah, good
We had,
stuff.
I think there's value in going back to what we started talking about, which,
Yes.
because I think it's all the same thing. But you were talking about how did this podcast start? And you were talking about how we were meeting on Zoom every Sunday and ...
Well, yeah, and so you're like, you want to do this, and I was like, okay. And I had done some um, interpersonal work, had completed it in June, May or June. So if you would have asked me a year ago, January, this not this January, but a year ago, this past January, I would not have been able to say yes. Like there probably would have been a
to
part of
doing
me
this
that,
podcast. Yeah.
correct. There would have been a part of me that wanted to do the podcast, but the fear of being visible, being
Mm-hmm.
filmed, because we record it and you can,
Mm-hmm.
you're either audio or visual and both. I would have been petrified to allow myself to just be who I am, not think I had to
Yeah.
be someone, whatever, look a certain way, present.
Yeah.
And I would not have been able to say yes. I'd have been too scared, worried about what people thought of me, making a
Mm.
mistake, blah, 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 fill in all the blanks. I don't
Yeah.
think anybody can relate to that right now. And so it was really just divine, because I remember it was probably a couple of years ago where you had started a podcast for Red Treasure Band. And so
Yeah.
you'd come down to San Diego and you're like, oh, I want to, let's do a podcast on, and we already did this one, right? On the,
Yeah, we could argue that this podcast actually started with Red Treasure Rising, which was the 12 episode podcast I did for my band. Yeah.
yeah, because
Because we did one episode with you.
I remember sitting in your car and you recorded it and we chatted about that. And when we got done, I was like, oh, I want to do that again. That was fun. And then I
Yeah.
was listening to, I think it's Roll One Investing, and it's a woman and her dad, and they, talk about Roll One Investing. And I listened to that for a while, and probably even in listening to them, I was like, and you know what? Going back to the Howard Stern show and Robin, when I worked for the post office back in I think it was in the early 90s when I listened to them regularly. Probably even back then, there was some form of that I loved that
Yeah.
I probably put what we're doing now in my vortex back then. So just like incrementally putting in. And so thankfully, like, again, spirit, God, I like to call it God, energy working in my life. And I was able to, even though I had that look and we're like, here we are. What'd you say,
Yeah.
7 years later? And I'm doing it again, like asking you to stretch out of your fear. And luckily I had the power to say yes. And here we are. And what is this episode?
Yeah. I mean, I think like as someone who like intellectually knows the material, what we talk about here, that the law of attraction is a thing. It's not just like something to get into. It's like, it's literally, you've said it before, Abraham says it's like gravity. It's not like you can believe in it or not. It's going to affect you either way.
Well, and this is really about the art of allowing, because
Yes.
the law of attraction, it just is. And
Right.
so
We're
my
talking about what's
message
the
is
best way to work with something that is.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so my whole thing is like, sharing with others about the art of allowing is how to
Yeah.
work in our favor.
And the two moments that you talked about, the moment where I was like, hey, you just said you got, somebody in your life brought musical instruments in your home and you wanted to play music with somebody. You want to play music like Saturday at your house with me? and the moment where, so we were doing the friend thing and we had no intention of doing a podcast. We were just on Zoom to catch up as friends.
Yeah.
But the moment where we were talking about this kind of stuff and we'd done it like at least 3 times or some in the friend time that we thought it was all that was going to be, when I got that thing of like, this is a podcast, like those are both moments I really treasure, because those are times where I really felt like, oh, spirit, the universe, however you want to think about it, like gave me the little light bulb.
Yeah.
And instead of doing something that I've done a lot in my life, I think a lot of people do it, saying, that's a crazy idea. Like, I'm going to let that go by the boards. I was like, no, I think that's really, there's some scary stuff about it. Stephanie might even be too scared to do it. I might be too scared to do it, but like, get those words out of your mouth. Like, this is a moment where you have this divine inspiration. It's not something where my ego is trying to force something. It's like, I've really accidentally, I think I've listened with my heart instead of my, intellectual, logical analysis thinking. And like, I'm really like in the moment, I'm like, oh no, we should do this. And I think sometimes I get annoyed when like shows on hosts, like on TV, people will compliment each other. Like, oh, well, that was a great report, Karen, on the news. And I'm like, you're a news, you like, I'm the viewer, I'm the customer here. Like, don't tell Kim she did a great report. I will be the judge, But so I'm about to do that thing, but I feel like, because I had done a radio show, I had done 2 radio shows in college way back.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I had been on the radio in one way or another for, I think, 3 years.
Wow.
I did 12 episodes of the Red Treasure Rising podcast. And so for me, I do a whole bunch of different things, but this is a mode that I've done before. And I've just been really impressed with how comfortable you are, how, I know your personality, and sometimes I'll know somebody's like in-person personality. And then if they're a performer in whatever way, I see them perform and it's like, oh, they're kind of putting on a little bit of a facade, and I don't see that with you. I see like the Stephanie I know and love, like come out pretty freely in this podcast. And I just adore that. I think it's really wonderful, but I think it's one of those things where like, now I can understand somebody watching this podcast and being like, oh, of course. Well, Stephanie's great at doing podcasts. I mean, she's just like, you can just see, she's just a natural. And I'm like, oh, but this is the thing. Like, by sharing what you just shared, I think you've shown people that like, no, like terrified, like a year earlier, wouldn't have even considered it. Like, I kind of know how I know you. So I know how that conversation would have gone. I would have been like, you want to do a podcast? And you're like, that doesn't feel right for me right now.
No, I would have just been like, no, I could not. I would have been like, no. Yeah. Well, and I want to say too that this has been a journey because
oh yeah,
I remember, I don't remember the year, but let's just say 2002, and I really wanted to, maybe not 2002, 2004. I always try to remember when I found out about coaching, and and I wanted to be a coach, and I had a friend who wanted to come in and rearrange what people already had in their home, their furniture and everything, and just make it better. And so we decided to work on each other. Like, I was going to coach her, and then she was going to come in. She did a great job. We ended up rearranging things, ended up getting some pieces of furniture I didn't even think we would end up getting. So when it came time for me to coach her, we were doing the session, and she's like, who are you? Because I had this belief that I had to look a certain way and behave a certain way in order to be a life coach. And so when I got into my coach mode with her, she was like, I don't see you. Like, who is that? That was uncomfortable. And I remember that. And then, so it's been my whole journey since that point up until maybe a few years ago of like getting that belief out of my head that I had to look and act a certain way in order to be a coach, in order to, and so it's been a long, slow journey, but I really feel like, last year when I did a lot of that interpersonal work, it cleared out a lot of stuff for me, and God was able to come in and help me just be myself and be like, you either like me or you don't, and that's kind of the case with everyone in all things, right? And we have a mutual friend, and she just shows up how she is. It's kind of like what we were talking about earlier, and I wrote down, fall down 7, get up 8. And I've done that in my life, and she was a great example of just showing up how she is and not really giving an F. And of course we do to some degree, you know, but for the most part she wasn't going to let it stop her from being who she was, and
Mm.
making mistakes, and just, you know, being raw and real. And I remember when she first started doing it, we were hanging out a lot, I would be like like I would just like, oh, because, you know, I was the one who like had to put on a show, be like a look a certain way, and da da
Mm.
da. And she was such a great teacher for me to just be like, and it's okay, because I adore her, I loved her, she taught me,
Mm.
she's a great teacher for me by doing that.
Mm.
And so I think there were all of these little things that happened, you know, this, I think of the paving stones along the way that helped me get to this point of being able
Mm.
to do this. So, and it's been
Yeah,
something that I've wanted, I didn't know. So,
yeah, it reminds me of thank you for sharing that. It reminds me of a couple of things actually. Like I remember because I tried a bunch of different, I'm interested, I consider myself a multi-potentialite from the book that I'm pretty fond of, called You Can Have Everything, I think is the name of it.
I like that. Oh, you can have everything.
Yeah.
Check that out.
And because in that, because I know now that I'm interested in a bunch of different things, creatively, but also like, I like, if you look at my YouTube history, it's like, oh my Lord, like I watch documentaries, I will literally go from like some British, talk show interviewing, I don't know, Denise Richards about her, failed marriage with Charlie Sheen to like, nuclear physics and like, how does a nuclear reactor actually work? And it's just insane. But anyway,
It's one of the things
but
I like about you.
I've come to like that about myself too. But so, I'm multiply interested creatively. And there was a while though that I was really trying to focus career-wise on playwriting, and I thought that would evolve into screenwriting for television and film eventually. But I focused on writing for the theater at first. And I was fortunate enough, I had done theater in grad school, so I had all these like actor friends always, and who were very dear to me and who were just up for everything. And none of them were in the union yet, so I didn't have to worry about paying or not paying. They were usually available to do something for free as long as I could work with their schedule. So when I was trying to when I was writing plays and, trying to improve them, get them ready to be sent to a theater or entered into a competition or something, I would quite often get a bunch of my actor friends and I'd be like, hey, I finished another draft of this script. Can we rent a theater? I'll rent a theater and like, let's just do a stage reading. I'm going to invite some other friends in the theater to watch and listen. And then everybody just give me feedback at the end, and I'll use that for the rewrites. And which was really fun. But I got this like, very consistent message whenever I would get the feedback, which is, you're overwriting, Collin, meaning like you're over explaining, like the characters don't just do something and then move on. They like do something, like they tell you that they're going to do something and they do that thing in front of the audience very clearly. And then they talk to a character afterwards about like what they did. And that's just one example, but basically what they're saying is like, you're not trusting the audience, you're overwriting, you're trying to control and make sure that the audience gets the point that you as a writer were trying to do. And what my friends were trying to explain to me, and it was just very hard for me to get it at first, which is like, that's not your role as the writer. Your role as the writer is to sort of channel the inspiration of these characters and tell the story and get your hands off. And it seems counterintuitive in a way, because you're like, well, the writer's ultimately the controller. The writer is like the person that plays God. They come up with the characters, they come up with the story, but you still aren't in charge. That's the weird thing. Like, you're still not in charge. There's still a level of surrender and letting go you have to do, where you just sort of like write the character, write the scene, and you just sort of like let it go. And some people in the audience aren't going to get it. And some people are going to read stuff into it that you never even dreamed. And like, that's part of that's part of the process. But when I got into songwriting, I think it was just one thing that was evident for me was that for whatever reason, playwriting gave my issues about trying to control it, trying to force things, way more leeway. and I don't know if it's just that I could write a lot more, like you can I wrote a 4-hour play once, not recommended, but you can do it. But like songwriting, I mean, theoretically I could write, every song is like Stairway to Heaven, like a 13-minute, epic journey. But for the most part, songs are like, between 2 and 5 minutes, and you got to keep it in that range. I think some of that forced the structure of songwriting, forcing me to keep it simple, actually helps me channel the divine inspiration that I feel my creativity is a lot more purely. And I don't struggle as much with like trying to rein it in or whatever. For whatever reason, songwriting has always, for me, ever since I first discovered it for myself, been this mode where I surrender to the creative process a lot more naturally and easily than I do. Not that I don't struggle at all. I've definitely written songs where now I look back and I was like, oh yeah, I almost did the playwriting thing with that song. Like I decided I'm going to write a song about this and it's going to have a first verse that's this. And that wasn't the muse. That was like my fear of the audience's reaction once it was finished or whatever, So I feel like, I don't know how I got on this, but that was one thing that came up for me. The other thing was that I had this, I did study acting for a while, and I was an actor myself. I was actively acting for a while, mostly in graduate school and things like that, or like small theaters around the country. And I was in really my first mode of acting school. And there was this acting teacher who had been at the university for a long time. And she had this like very large reputation at the university. And she was sort of famous for being like a very like drill sergeant. Like from what I heard of her other students before I took her class, it was like her whole thing was like, for you to really be an actor, you have to be so vulnerable and everything. So I'm going to break you down in my classes and then I'm going to build you back up. And it was almost like abusive, like she would like get people to talk about like their worst trauma in front of everybody. So she could like break people down and then from what I was hearing about the philosophy, I'm like, yeah, I'm not really wild and crazy about this. And there was a lot of people that really detested her and saw her as like a real life villain because they felt like, oh, this isn't acting. This isn't whatever, but whatever. She had that philosophy. And at some point I took her class and I was like, because I was very new to acting. Most of her students were like the dedicated, like, I'm going to be an actor in New York. Like they've been taking classes with her for 3 years. Yeah. And I was just like, yeah, I think acting's cool, and I'm like, am I going to get crushed like a grape in this class on a daily basis? And the interesting thing was, I feel like she had a certain kind of wisdom that I really appreciate because it's like, she very rarely talked to me. Like I would do a scene and sometimes she'd just be like, okay, thank you, Collin. And I'd just be like, where's the like, 3-minute monologue just eviscerating me emotionally in front of everybody.
You were going to squash me.
Yeah. Like where's the abuse, man? I can't. But there was one thing that she said, not all the time, but she said it several times throughout the course. And she would, and it's just so funny about like, she wouldn't like, and I watched other people, she would do what I'd heard about. She would work with somebody for 2 hours on a scene and they talk about like, some abusive episode from a real life episode from their childhood that was awful. And the actress is crying and all the people in the class are crying and I'm crying. And it's like, and like, I would get up there. She would not do any of that with me. And I was like, what the hell's going on? Like, I'm kind of like relieved. And like, I feel like, I got shortchanged. Yeah. Like I paid for this class too, I paid for the full ride. But the one thing that she said periodically to me is she would just I just remember it so clearly. She would just be like, we'd do the scene and she'd be like, Collin, you got to trust. Okay, who's next? I was like, what the hell is that?
Wow.
But it's like I think she saw in me, my guess is if we talked to her, I think she's passed away a few years ago, but if she was here and I asked her about that, I think my guess is what she would say is like, she saw that there was a creative spark in me, whether I was a talented actor or not, who knows what she thought, but there was definitely like a creative spark. Like she respected the fact that I came to the class, I learned the scene, I got up there, that takes courage, whatever. Mm-hmm. But she could tell there was something in me at that time in my mid-20s where I didn't, like a lot of people, I didn't trust just letting myself be who I was in the present moment. Just let whatever's out there creatively come through me and trust that that was enough and okay. Like there was still part of me that's trying to like control my presentation of the character to the audience. There's that element of like, I'm insecure that I won't be perceived. Like people will think I'm not a good actor. So I'm going to try to grab the reins and control their impression of me. And ironically, that is what makes you a bad actor. Like the more you try to control or playwright or almost anything, like the more as an artist, you try to control your audience's reaction ahead of time. My experience has been the less compelling and moving and genuine your art is, you know, the results are. So
That's
I don't know
beautiful.
how I got to either of those points out of what we were talking about, but that's what came up.
We were talking about the evolution, you know, of like not being real.
Oh, how
and
the
genuine.
podcast evolved. Yeah.
Well, and even I was sharing about earlier about my experience of like just allowing myself to be who I am, and that that is what's attractive.
Yeah.
And that all, because that's why my friend liked me. It was just who I was, and she trusted me, and so she wanted to be coached by me and help me, you know, hone my craft. But then I was coming off as I was being ingenuine because I wasn't being myself.
Yeah.
And so
it's interesting too, because I feel like most people know, like if you go to a party, again, pre-COVID, you go to a party and there's somebody there that you don't know, but you get introduced, you know, through the mutual friends or whatever, and you're talking to this person, and this person is loud, you know, kind of obnoxious, and you can kind of, and they have this like sort of fake personality. It's like, I feel like human to human, we sense that immediately. Like we have this sense of like, I don't even know you. I don't even know what the real you is like, but you're putting, I know that somehow I know intuitively that you're putting on a show for me in the negative way. You're trying to portray to me that you're someone that I don't think you really are. And you're trying to control my opinion of you as you present yourself to me. And for most people, it's a huge turnoff. And yet I feel like most people in the world have some kind of that fear about how are other people going to think of me operative. And we're doing a little bit of that. We're doing a little bit of inauthenticness. And it's just sort of interesting of like how we all kind of intuitively are repelled by it when we see it in someone else. And yet that doesn't necessarily on its own help us be like, oh yeah, I need to make sure I'm not like that at all. You know, it's like, oh no, I've got some of that going on and I'm keeping that, you know, like I'm not going to tell this, you know, person in my life this thing that I'm scared of their reaction because, you know, I don't want to see how that's going to go. And it's like, yeah, that's you doing that guy from the party a little bit.
I want to talk a little bit about something that we were talking about earlier in friend time, and
did we close the loop on how just to close the loop, the podcast started because we were doing this friend time, and eventually you and I were spending so much of the friend time talking about this sort of stuff, the law of attraction, the art of allowing, spirituality, all these things, that got the light bulb for me of like, oh, we should have our friend time as usual, but then we should actually record on Zoom and we should do a podcast, and you were open to it. And now the struggle is that we start our friend time and we think there's this huge separation between friend time and the podcast. And the problem is we always start talking about this stuff in friend time and are like, sometimes we're like, turn on the record button.
On the record. So
today we went way too far in friend time. We were talking about this stuff for a long time, and then we're like, we should have recorded like the last 12 minutes.
Well, and I needed some friend time, and we started later.
No, I did too.
But as you were talking about, because then we started doing what we did in our coaching sessions, as I said, tell me something good. And so that was because both of us were kind of in this funky place. And then I was like, I go, we can talk about any of that funky stuff for like a minute, 2 max. And then we need to, and then we never got to the funky stuff really. But one of the subjects that you talked about, just in Tell Me Something Good, I was like, oh my God, where's the record button? Cause
I know.
But you had said what we were talking about before, and and I thought, oh yeah, it reminded me of fall down 7, get up 8, because in,
Can
when
you
I,
just explain what you mean by that?
well, like with anything, like, we talk about like, oh, I failed,
Mm,
or that didn't work out, or for
mm,
me, where I picked that up from was, I when I first got introduced to The Secret, and then I really resonated with Abraham Hicks, and started, I had so much of their material and would listen to it and try to practice
mm.
it, and I wanted that immediate fix, like, oh, this is going to be it, and I'd try it for like a nanosecond, and it didn't work, and I'd go back to being my usual self or life stuff, and then I'd be like yearning for change, and I'd try it again, and so I kept going, doing this, trying it, doesn't work, expecting miracles right away, and so, um, to finally one day, years later, um, something stuck,
Mm,
and then it just, I was like, wanted more and would practice it more, and then it just was like life altering.
mm,
Um, but what I got from that, trying the practicing the art of allowing it not work, feeling like it not wasn't working because I wouldn't stick with it long enough. I would like
mm,
try to gauge it too soon and
yeah.
then
Keep
compare
it
to like
core.
the physical results, and it was like, what? And so I got that, like, oh, fall down 7 but get up 8, because I would always, whatever, not maybe everything, but many things I would try and fail, but I always would eventually go back to it. And so I loved that terminology, fall down 7, get up 8. Because
A lot of people don't appreciate the wisdom of the band Chumbawamba when they said, I get knocked down, but I get up again.
yeah, and I think I'm gonna cry.
Sorry.
I think that if nothing else today, if you could get that, like, whatever, wherever you may be in your life, if you're being hard on yourself, if you feel like you've tried and you failed, it's like, baby, get up, wipe your knees off, and keep on going. Just
Yeah.
like, if you fall down 20 times, get up 21. Just like, yeah.
I made a joke. I mean, I just sort of feel like it's hard to introduce the band Chumbawamba without joking. But um, I recently, in one of my YouTube, I don't even know what to call it, spirals, um, I saw, because YouTube has this wonderful way of suggesting videos I might be interested in. And even if I don't agree with them in the beginning, sometimes I end up watching them. But I had, like I was listening to a bunch of songs that just make me feel good. And actually that song by Chumbawamba makes me feel really good. And I hadn't listened to it for a while. So I was watching the video on YouTube and listening to the song as it played.
And how does it go? I probably know it, but by just hearing you, I
I
don't know
get
it.
knocked down, but I get up again. You're never gonna keep me down. I get knocked down, but I get up again. You're
Okay,
never gonna keep me down. That
nice.
um, that YouTube suggested all these choral groups that had done a choral version of it in the United Kingdom, in the United States. There was one in San Francisco, there's one in London, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And it's just so funny because so the camera, pans people when they're doing that part, and they're singing like, I get knocked down, but I get up again. You're never going to keep me down. And like to a person, like in all these videos, I don't know how many I watched. Like I didn't see the camera go by a single person who, when they're singing that line, isn't like as on fire as a human being as I feel. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
and they're not fake. I mean, it just doesn't look like they're
It's
faking it.
no,
Like
no
they're not like,
way.
oh, this is the
Yeah,
part of the song where I get jazzed. It's like they're genuinely jazzed. And I think there's
yeah,
something about that, even though it's like this one hit wonder pop song thing and all that. I think the reason that song got popular, why it's still in the culture, is that line. And there's just something fundamentally correct that it nailed about humanity, in that like part of our journey is stumbling. Part of our journey is
it is.
not doing things, and like if we looked back with only our ego and our perfectionism, we would be like, oh my God, that was a mess,
Hmm.
But there's this thing about the human spirit where if you're in touch with it, you want to get back up again. Like after you make, quote, a mistake, or you, quote, fail, there's something within most of us that is like, well, that's not going to be the end of this story. I'm going to, like, and there's so many, there's so many like the Rocky movies and all these things about like, it's not, and, I don't watch as much anymore, but I used to watch a ton of professional American sports on TV and watch the press conferences on ESPN and thing afterwards. And a lot of athletes say the same thing, is like, I do not measure my, value to the team or whatever by how many wins we have, how many victories, whether we won the Super Bowl or whatever. I measure it by how many times did I fall down and fail, and then I got back up and improved myself as a result. Like, how many times I do that, that's how I, and I don't think our culture generally views success that way. We have this kind of messed up idea that success is just, you do something and you win, and you do something and you win, and you do something and you kill it. There's that song, another pop song, all I do is win, 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 and there's like this kind of like, that one's cool to sing, like, all I do is win. But if you're talking about how the ego would look at things, how people's perfectionism, including my own, would look at things, that song is not accurate about life. Because anybody that's ever accomplished anything great that's been, gotten into the news or the history books or anything, it's like, oh my God, they failed so many times, like Tom Brady was a backup quarterback at the University of Michigan. He played something like, I don't even know, like 10 games over his whole 4 years. And he was not amazing, and he sat on the bench for the New England Patriots for a long time. And then one day they put him in and he was amazing, but he wasn't like the star at Michigan. He wasn't, he didn't break all the records for 4 years in college. And then, like, he had a weird journey, and a lot of people do. Sorry.
And I think, we all love to win. It feels really good to win. We want to win.
Right.
Yet I think we hear about the wins and we don't hear about the struggles until after the win, and it's all part of it. And like, I know Kentucky Fried Chicken, the Colonel, like, he was denied, like, said no to like 2000. Yeah. And he's like in his 60s, I think, when he finally, became successful to what he had wanted, what he set out to do. But and so many actors, they had a career for like 20 years, but then they didn't get big until their 21st year or something. And so
Jack Nicholson. And
I think Samuel L. and Morgan
Freeman.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. But so it is a part of the journey, is to fail. And I think we, myself included, many times have beaten myself up mentally, emotionally, or stopped, been like, didn't do it, didn't happen in this timeline. And so
sorry to interrupt, but there's a thing I feel like if I can remember all the pieces, it sort of ties almost everything I was trying to talk about today together. Because your thing about when I was talking about the band that we had for one day, and you're like, well, you guys were musicians, I was just there with a drum in my hand. Because I do, and this goes into
wanna be a musician. It's in me.
Yeah. And the thing that we were talking about in friend time that should have been on the podcast, but we didn't hit the record button soon enough, which was an episode of Off Camera with Sam Jones, which I recommend everybody watch on YouTube. It's an interview with Dax Shepard, the actor, and now he has, I think, a really cool podcast. What we were talking about is the fact that it's a long story about Dax Shepard hitting one of his many bottoms on drug and alcohol abuse, and finally, like, okay, I got to give this up. And the thing that he realized, without telling the whole story here, but the thing that he realized at the end of it was that he had been under the impression that if he got the career he wanted and was able to get the success in the career that he wanted, so, doing big Hollywood movies, being a star in big Hollywood movies, if he had enough money, he had over $1 million when he finally kind of accepted his alcoholism, drug addiction, and got into recovery and everything. If he had enough attention from women, all these things. And he had this realization at the end of it, like, that he had gotten all the things, the external things, and that those by themselves did not combine to make him happy. and so that he was like, there's got to be something else. And so I don't know what that is. So I've got to go learn it from the people who have, given up drugs and alcohol and found something else. Cause like I have everything I wanted in terms of like what we call the cash and prizes of life, like career, money, attention from the opposite sex, opportunities, all that kind of thing. And I think that there's this idea out there that still, despite all this evidence, you can watch shows about, anybody like Jimi Hendrix, Marilyn Monroe, just all these people that followed the things as part of who they were. Part of their life journey was following the things, trying to get the cash and prizes of life and thinking that's what was going to make them happy. That the truth and the reality is, and this is what makes all this law of attraction, art of allowing stuff tricky for me, and I'm sure a lot of other people, is that it's the reverse. Like the best way to enjoy your life is not to get things and then try to be happy. It's the reverse. It's be happy with what you have today. And if you're really feeling good a lot of the time about the way things are, about how you are, whatever state you're in, about career, job, whatever state you're in, single, married, married, happy, married, unhappy, going through divorce, divorced and bitter, whatever. If you can be happy where you're at, that's your thing about feeling good. However you get that to happen in yourself. If you feel good, your vibration that you're putting out to the universe is going to be this like, I feel good vibration. And that is going to, the law of attraction is going to act on that as it acts on everything, and is going to bring more good stuff to you. But we get addicted to this kind of idea that like, well, I'm going to go get the things. And then once I have everything, then I'll let myself be happy because I'll have all the things.
Or we think that that's where our happiness is going to come from.
Yeah.
Or we think like I can't be happy until I get X, Y, and Z.
That's the thing that Dax Shepard was saying is like,
and that's bullshit.
He was aware. He was so aware of, and in a way, I think he's really lucky. I'm sure he went through a lot of hellish things, in recovery, but where he was lucky is that can be an endless cycle that just leads you to your own ruin. Like you can just be like, well, I need one more thing. I need one more thing. I need one more thing. And just never get there.
Always raising the bar to like,
right. But what he was grateful for was he said, I did have a list, I wanted to be a famous actor, have $1 million or more, have women think I'm awesome. And he's like,
in a movie.
Yeah, and being in a big movie that he was about to star in. And like, he's like, I remembered that list and I was aware that I had everything on that list. I remember when I made the list in my head, thinking that if I had everything on the list, that would make me happy. And I had this moment of clarity where I knew I had everything on the list, and I knew I was so sad and miserable and feeling terrible about myself, my life, everything, that I was close to suicidal intentions. So it couldn't be the things on the list alone that make life happy. And that has been a massive struggle for me in trying to understand that, the law of attraction works no matter what. Art of allowing and feeling good is the number one way to like get the law of attraction to work for you.
Or feeling better.
Feeling better.
We're like, I'm feeling good. I don't care feeling, but just feeling better. Feeling better
than you did before. But still understanding that the goal, and Abraham does talk about this, but I don't think a lot of people focus on it because it's not like the cash and prizes part of what Abraham talks about. But, she says like, this whole thing about manifesting is a trick in a way, because you actually don't want the thing. Like if you want a new car, your thing isn't really that you really want a new car. What you want as a human is you want the feeling inside you that you think you're going to have when the car's in your driveway.
Yeah, it's a feeling.
And there's nothing wrong with wanting a new car, wanting to go on a really cool vacation, wanting $10 million, whatever. But the thing is, it's like, if you make your happiness dependent on getting the thing, the thing actually won't fulfill that.
Person, place, or thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's this really when you said right before we did hit the record button, like, well, so what is the topic exactly? And I said, well, I think it's walking that line between understanding that this is where I have issues with the Buddhists. I love a lot about Buddhism, but I always get into this argument with them because I believe desire is human. I believe it's natural, and I believe it's part of our life. I don't believe it's like this evil thing we should try to repress.
And I think like if I have a desire, like
Mhm.
spirit, God put that in me to experience. And so like anybody who has a dream or desire, I'm like all for it, baby. Yeah. It's there for you to experience, for me to experience.
Yeah. Yeah. But if you get attached, if I get attached to the dream in the sense of I need the dream to come true, I'm going to be dissatisfied and unhappy until I get the dream to come true. Yeah. That's not the point of life. The point of life.
That's where the art of allowing comes in.
Yeah. Is to feel as good as you can as often as you can.
Right now. Yeah. Feel as good as you can as often as you can.
So it's this weird kind of ironic thing to me. Some of what we do, what we practice is I can understand how I get hung up on it, how other people are like, what? Wait, it seems like opposite things because you're telling me this is the way to get these things I've really wanted. Like I really want a great relationship in my life, a romantic partner or something. I really want more money. I've been struggling financially. I really want a job that I really enjoy. I've had these jobs I hate my whole life. And you're telling me that to get those things, the best thing I can do is kind of look around at what I've got and feel good about it.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's tricky, but
I know it's counterintuitive and a lot of this stuff is, it
is. Yeah.
And and life is really simple. Like, you know, it's not rocket science. We try to complicate the heck out of it. And it's really, really simple, basic. And so awesome.
I'm really, this was probably the episode we had the least amount of a roadmap of what the topic was. And it's like already, other than the ones where we've had guests, because our guest episodes have been so amazing to me.
Yay.
And it's not a competition, but this is my favorite episode so far.
Aw, nice. Well, and I think we were able to come full circle. So yay.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for, did you want to
say I just want to put out, if someone knows how to edit and would love to volunteer their services so that we could hit record when we start our friend time and then tell you we want this piece and that piece. So that way we can, because earlier was amazing and this was awesome too, but that would be fun. So contact either one of us. We'd love to chat with you and see if we can make some magic happen here.
Absolutely. I second that. I second that. Yes.
Okay.
All right. But thank you so much, everyone who's listening to us on the audio version on the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Those of you watching on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. If you feel compelled or called to like and subscribe, it helps us a lot. We're super grateful. And we'll put all the, Stephanie, if people want to get in touch with you.
www.powerinjoy, powerinjoy.com. Love to hear from you.
And if you want to get in touch with me, it's collinworster.com. We'll put all the links and everything in the comments below. All right. So thank you so much again for joining us on this little journey, especially if you've made it the whole way. If you're part of there's this thing on YouTube. Have you seen this? The Watch to the End Club. So if you've made it into the CoCreation Station Watch to the End Club, we especially thank you.
Yes.
And we'll see you next time on CoCreation Station.
Bye.
Bye.